47 motorcycles roared to life in the middle of the night. Their destination? A small house where a child's scream had just shattered the silence. This wasn't a gang. This was a rescue mission. And what they did next would change everything. The rain hammered against the windows of Murphy's garage like bullets from heaven, each drop carrying with it the weight of a story that was about to unfold. Inside, beneath the harsh fluorescent lights, Marcus Steele Rodriguez wiped his oil-stained hands on a rag, his weathered face etched with lines that spoke of countless miles on the open road. At 52, Steele had seen it all. 28 years of riding with the Iron Wolves Motorcycle Club had taught him that the world wasn't always kind to those who couldn't protect themselves. The brotherhood he'd found among his fellow riders wasn't just about the thunderous roar of Harley engines or the freedom of the highway. It was about standing up for what was right, even when the system failed. The phone rang, cutting through the ambient noise of the garage. Steele glanced at the caller ID and recognized the number immediately. Sarah Chun, a social worker who'd worked with the club on several community outreach programs over the years. "Steele, I need your help." Sarah's voice was tight with urgency. "There's a situation. A kid named Tommy Martinez. He's 8 years old and—" Her voice broke slightly. "His stepfather has been abusing him. The system is moving too slowly, and I'm afraid if we don't act soon—" Steele's jaw tightened. In his world, there were lines you didn't cross, codes you didn't break. Hurting a child was the most sacred of those boundaries. "Tell me everything," he said, his voice steady as granite. Within an hour, Steele's phone had buzzed with messages to every member of the Iron Wolves. The emergency code, a simple code blue, meant only one thing. An innocent was in danger, and the Brotherhood was being called to action. The clubhouse, an old brick building on the outskirts of town, filled quickly despite the late hour. Men and women wearing leather vests adorned with the club's distinctive wolf patch gathered around the worn wooden table, where so many decisions had been made over the years. "Brothers and sisters," Steele began, his voice carrying the authority of someone who'd earned respect through decades of loyalty and integrity. "We have a situation that requires our immediate attention." He laid out the facts as Sarah had presented them. Tommy Martinez, a quiet 8-year-old with dark hair and haunted eyes, lived with his mother Maria and stepfather Rick Donnelly. Donnelly, a local construction foreman with a drinking problem and a history of violence, had been systematically abusing the boy for months. "The bruises are getting worse," Steele continued, reading from Sarah's notes. "School nurses have reported suspicious injuries twice, but each time Donnelly has an explanation. The boy is too scared to speak up, and his mother—" Steele paused, his voice heavy with understanding. "She's terrified, too." Jake Roadhog Thompson, the club's vice president and a former Marine, leaned forward. His massive frame cast a shadow across the table as he spoke. "What's the law doing about it?" "Moving at a snail's pace," Steele replied. "Sarah says they need more evidence, more documentation. Meanwhile, this kid goes home every night to a nightmare." The room fell silent, except for the distant rumble of thunder outside. These weren't vigilantes or criminals. They were mechanics, construction workers, teachers, and small business owners who happened to share a passion for motorcycles and an unwavering code of ethics. "So what's the plan?" asked Lisa Phoenix Martinez, the club's treasurer and a nurse at the local hospital. Her connection to healing made crimes against children particularly offensive to her. Steele stood up, his hands flat on the table. "We do what we always do. We protect those who can't protect themselves. But we do it smart and we do it legal." Over the next few days, the Iron Wolves became a well-oiled machine of investigation and protection. Their network extended far beyond the motorcycle club. They had connections throughout the community that most people never realized. Phoenix used her hospital contacts to quietly review any medical records related to Tommy Martinez. What she found painted a disturbing picture. 3 emergency room visits in 6 months, each with injuries that raised red flags but have been explained away. Meanwhile, Roadhog, whose day job was in construction, discovered that Donnelly had been fired from 2 previous jobs for aggressive behavior toward co-workers. The pattern was becoming clearer. Steele coordinated with Sarah Chun, ensuring that everything they did supported rather than hindered the official investigation. They weren't trying to replace law enforcement. They were trying to accelerate justice for a child who couldn't wait for bureaucracy to catch up with reality. "I've got eyes on the house," reported Carlos Whisper Valdez, the club's road captain, during their evening briefing. "Donnelly comes home drunk most nights around 9 p.m. The shouting starts about 20 minutes later." The weight of that information settled over the room like a heavy blanket. Each of these men and women had their own stories. Some had been victims themselves. Others had children or grandchildren they move heaven and earth to protect. "We need to be smart about this," Steele cautioned. "One wrong move, and we can make things worse for Tommy and his mother." Chapter 4. The plan takes shape. The Iron Wolves' approach was methodical and legal. They understood that their reputation as tough bikers could work against them if they weren't careful, but it could also work in their favor if they played their cards right. Their first step was documentation. Members began discreetly monitoring the Martinez household, photographing Donnelly's comings and goings, noting his condition when he returned home, and documenting the timeline of events each night. Phoenix had also connected with Dr. Amanda Torres, a pediatrician who specialized in abuse cases. Dr. Torres agreed to examine Tommy during a routine school health screening, providing additional medical documentation that could support the case. But perhaps most importantly, they focused on Tommy's mother, Maria. Through Sarah Chun, they learned that Maria was trapped in a cycle of fear and financial dependence. Donnelly controlled the household finances and had isolated her from her family and friends. "She wants to leave," Sarah explained during one of their meetings. "But she's terrified of what he might do, and she doesn't think she can support herself and Tommy alone." This was where the Iron Wolves community connections truly shined. Lisa Phoenix's sister ran a women's shelter 2 towns over. Roadhog's cousin was an employment lawyer who specialized in helping abuse victims navigate the legal system. Steele himself had connections to several small businesses that had hired women escaping domestic violence situations in the past. "We build her a bridge," Steele declared. "We show her there's a way out, a safe way out, for both her and Tommy." Chapter 5. The intervention begins. The plan they developed was elegant in its simplicity. Rather than confronting Donnelly directly, which could escalate the danger for Tommy and Maria, they would systematically remove his power and control while building a support network around his victims. It started with Maria's workplace. She worked part-time at a local diner, where her manager, coincidentally, was married to one of the Iron Wolves' honorary members. Through casual conversation, the manager learned about Maria's situation and began documenting Donnelly's harassment when he occasionally showed up at the restaurant to check on his wife. Meanwhile, Tommy's school became part of Protection Network. The principal, once made aware of the situation through proper channels, ensured that Tommy was never released to anyone other than his mother without explicit written permission. The school counselor began working with Tommy, helping him understand that he wasn't alone and that there were adults who cared about his safety. The Iron Wolves themselves maintained a visible but non-threatening presence in the neighborhood. They organized community events, a charity car wash, a food drive for the local food bank. That gave them legitimate reasons to be in the area, while keeping watchful eyes on the Martinez household. "The key," Steele explained to newer members, "is that we're not the vigilantes the movies make us out to be. We're community members who happen to ride motorcycles. Our strength isn't in intimidation. It's in our network, our resources, and our commitment to doing what's right." Chapter 6. The evidence mounts. As weeks passed, the case against Donnelly grew stronger. The combination of medical records, witness statements, photographic evidence, and testimony from social workers painted an undeniable picture of systematic abuse. Tommy himself began to open up to the school counselor, finally feeling safe enough to describe what was happening at home. His testimony, recorded by trained professionals in a child-friendly environment, provided the final pieces needed for law enforcement to act. But Donnelly wasn't oblivious to the changes happening around him. He began to grow suspicious of the increased attention his neighborhood was receiving. The presence of motorcycles on his street, the new security measures at his stepson's school, his wife's growing confidence. It all added up to something he didn't like. "He's getting paranoid," Whisper reported during one of their evening briefings. "I saw him arguing with Maria on their front porch yesterday. She stood her ground, which is new. He didn't like it." Steele nodded grimly. This is the dangerous part. Abusers often escalate when they feel their control slipping. We need to be ready to move quickly if necessary. They prepared for this possibility. Maria had been provided with a safety plan. Contact numbers, safe places to go, a bag packed with essential documents, and clothes hidden at her workplace. Tommy's school had been alerted to watch for any signs that the situation at home was deteriorating. Chapter 7. The Night Everything Changed. It was a Thursday night in October when everything came to a head. Donnelly had been drinking heavily at Murphy's bar. Ironically, the same bar where several Iron Wolves members were known to occasionally grab a beer. The bartender, who'd been briefed on the situation, made sure to document Donnelly's condition and behavior throughout the evening. When Donnelly stumbled home around 10 p.m., he was in a rage about something that had happened at work. The neighbors later reported hearing shouting that was louder and more violent than usual. Then came the sound that made everyone's blood run cold, a child's scream of genuine terror. Whisper, who was discreetly parked 2 blocks away, immediately radioed the emergency code. Within minutes, Steele and 3 other members were en route, while Phoenix contacted both the police and Child Protective Services from her position at the local emergency room. But they weren't the only ones who'd heard Tommy scream. Mrs. Henderson, the elderly woman who lived next door, had finally heard enough. Despite her fear of getting involved, she called 911, her voice shaking as she reported what she was hearing through the thin walls of the duplex. Chapter 8. The Rescue. When the police arrived at the Martinez house, they found a scene that would haunt the responding officers for years to come. Maria Martinez sat in the corner of the living room, a fresh bruise blooming on her cheek, holding her son protectively in her arms. Tommy's shirt was torn, and his face bore the clear handprint of an adult slap. Donnelly, still drunk and belligerent, tried to explain the situation away. The kid was being disrespectful, he slurred. Sometimes you gotta teach them respect. But the officers weren't buying it. The weeks of documentation, witness statements, and evidence gathered by the combined efforts of social services, the school system, and concerned community members, including the Iron Wolves, had created an undeniable case. As Donnelly was being arrested, Steele and several club members arrived on the scene. They didn't interfere with the police work, but their presence sent a clear message to everyone involved. This community protected its children, and justice had finally arrived. "You're not alone anymore," Steele said quietly to Maria as EMTs checked Tommy for injuries. "You got an entire community behind you now." Chapter 9. The Aftermath. The legal proceedings that followed were swift by the standards of the justice system. Donnelly was charged with multiple counts of child abuse, domestic violence, and assault. The mountain of evidence against him made a plea bargain his only realistic option, and he was sentenced to 5 years in prison, along with mandatory anger management and alcohol treatment programs. But for the Iron Wolves, the real victory wasn't in seeing Donnelly behind bars. It was in seeing Tommy Martinez smile for the first time in months. Maria had accepted a job at a local automotive parts store. The owner was a friend of Roadhog's, which came with health insurance and enough income to support her small family. Tommy thrived in his new environment. Free from the constant fear and trauma of abuse, he began to excel in school. The nightmares gradually faded, replaced by dreams of becoming a teacher like Mrs. Rodriguez, who'd been so kind to him during the darkest period of his life. The Iron Wolves established a scholarship fund in Tommy's name, designed to help other children who'd survived abuse pursue their educational goals. It was funded through their various charity events and supported by the broader community that had rallied around this one child story. Chapter 10. The Ripple Effect. Word of what happened in their small community spread throughout the motorcycle club network. Other chapters began reaching out, asking for guidance on how to set up similar community protection programs in their own areas. Steele found himself speaking at conferences and community events, explaining how motorcycle clubs could serve as positive forces in their neighborhoods. "We're not vigilantes," he would always emphasize. "We're community members who happen to ride motorcycles. Our real power comes from building networks of care and support, not from intimidation or violence." The Iron Wolves' approach became a model for other clubs across the country. They demonstrated that the stereotype of motorcycle clubs as lawless gangs was not only unfair, but counterproductive. These were people who understood loyalty, brotherhood, and the importance of protecting those who couldn't protect themselves. Maria Martinez began volunteering at the women's shelter where she'd once sought refuge, helping other women understand that escape from abusive relationships was possible with the right support network. Her story became a beacon of hope for countless others trapped in similar situations. Chapter 11, Lessons Learned. Years later, when people asked Steele about that October night and the events that led up to it, he would always emphasize the same points. First, that protecting children was everyone's responsibility, not just law enforcement or social services. Second, that real change happened through community action, not individual heroics. We didn't save Tommy Martinez by being tough guys on motorcycles, he would explain. We saved him by building a network of caring adults who refused to look the other way when a child was in danger. The motorcycles were just how we got around. The Iron Wolves continued their community work, but they also never forgot the lessons learned from Tommy's case. They developed protocols for identifying and responding to suspected abuse cases, always working within the legal system rather than outside it. They also understood that their reputation as bikers could be both an asset and a liability. Used properly, it could command respect and attention for important causes. Used improperly, it could undermine their credibility and effectiveness. Respect is earned through actions, not through intimidation, Steele would tell new members. We're not in the business of scaring people. We're in the business of protecting people. Chapter 12, A New Beginning. 5 years after that terrible October night, Tommy Martinez graduated from high school with honors. He'd grown into a confident young man who spoke openly about his experiences and his gratitude to the community that had saved him. At his graduation party, hosted in the Iron Wolves clubhouse, Tommy stood up to address the crowd of family, friends, and the motorcycle club members who become his extended family. People sometimes ask me if I'm angry about what happened to me when I was little, he said, his voice steady and clear. And I tell them that anger would be a waste of energy. Instead, I'm grateful. Grateful for my mom's courage, grateful for the community that stood up for us, and grateful for the lesson that no child has to face darkness alone. He looked around the room, making eye contact with Steele, Phoenix, Roadhog, and the other Iron Wolves members who played such crucial roles in his rescue and recovery. These people taught me that real strength isn't about being the toughest person in the room. Real strength is about standing up for people who can't stand up for themselves. That's a lesson I'll carry with me for the rest of my life. As the applause filled the clubhouse, Steele felt a deep sense of satisfaction. This was what the Brotherhood was really about. Not the motorcycles, not the leather, not the reputation. It was about the promise they made to their community. That no child would suffer alone, that no family would face danger without support, and that justice would prevail when good people chose to act. Epilogue. The promise continues. Today, the Iron Wolves Motorcycle Club continues their community work, having helped dozens of families over the years. Their motto has been adopted by motorcycle clubs across the country, creating a network of community protectors that spans thousands of miles and touches countless lives. Tommy Martinez is now studying to become a social worker, inspired by Sarah Chun and determined to help other children who find themselves in situations similar to what he experienced. He remains close to the Iron Wolves, considering them family, and often speaking at their community events about the importance of never giving up hope. Maria Martinez remarried, this time to a kind man who treats both her and her son with the love and respect they deserve. She often says that the night she thought was the end of her world was actually the beginning of her real life. And Steele Rodriguez? He continues to lead the Iron Wolves with the same steady wisdom and commitment to justice that guided them through Tommy's case. At 62, he shows no signs of slowing down, driven by the knowledge that there are always more children who need protection, more families who need support, and more communities that need reminding of what real brotherhood looks like. The Iron Wolves Clubhouse still displays a photo from Tommy's high school graduation, a reminder of why they do what they do. Below it, engraved in a simple wooden plaque, are the words that have become the club's unofficial motto. When darkness threatens the innocent, the Brotherhood rides. It's a promise they've kept for years, and a promise they'll continue to keep for generations to come. Because in a world that can sometimes seem cruel and indifferent, someone has to stand guard over those who cannot protect themselves. Someone has to be ready to answer the call when help is needed most. That someone in this small community and many others like it across the country rides on two wheels and wears the colors of brotherhood, justice, and hope. This story is a work of fiction inspired by real motorcycle clubs who engage in community service and child protection activities. Any resemblance to actual events or persons is purely coincidental.